You're listening to a special episode of the Artist Athlete Podcast. This podcast is dedicated to circus, and this episode is dedicated to loss and grief and circus. And before I go any further, I want to just express that this episode is talking about death and loss. There's no graphic language, but if these topics are triggering for you, please take care of yourself, but go ahead and turn off this episode and maybe listen to a different one or just go take care of yourself. Okay, friends, fans, and enemies. I'm Shannon McKenna. I'm the host of the Artist Athlete Podcast. I'm founded theartistathlete.com. And I have been on a break from podcasting for about a month and a half now, and I'm going to take a little longer. But this episode, interview, this thing that I have in my files is just kind of screaming to be produced. And so I wanted to put it out for all of you. Let me give you some backstory. In the 2 episodes before this one, if you go back, I interviewed the amazing and super influential Raphael Cruz, and we talked about his life, his career, how he defined circus. You know, it was the interview that you all come to know and love and expect from the Artist Athlete Podcast. But we left out a huge part of Francisco's life. And I left out this part because it's actually super tragic and pretty traumatic, and I was scared and uncomfortable, and I didn't quite know how to ask Francisco about it or if he even wanted to talk about it, and instead of asking, I kind of skirted around it until we stopped the recording after like 2 hours of talking about his whole life. And then when I hit the stop button and we were kind of like debriefing and processing and all of that, I was kind of like, hey, Francisco, would it be okay if I mentioned Raph? And Francisco said sure, because he's super polite and he's awesome and open. And I was like, okay, cool. Yeah, I'll dedicate the episodes to him, and I'll, my people will let you know when they're out. Boom. Hung up the call, said thank you, goodbye. And then a few hours after, Francisco sent me a DM and asked me if it would be okay if he came on again, or we re-recorded something talking a little bit more about Raph and what happened and how Francisco was kind of going through it. And to be honest, my first reaction was kind of like, oh no, how is this going to work? Because I do have kind of a policy with my guests. I tell them I don't really like to edit after the fact. I don't like to cut out or put in pieces of interviews, because something I love about the interview process is how conversational it is and how collaborative it can be and how we're kind of like making this thing together. And when you start chopping it up, it becomes a little artificial or strange. But there was also a part of me that knew that the right thing to do would be to figure out a way to acknowledge Raph, acknowledge Francisco's brother, Raphael Cruz. You guys are probably all like, what happened? What's going on? Who is Raphael Cruz? Why are we acknowledging him? And so here's the deal. Like Francisco said in his interview, he grew up with his little brother, and they would go to train with Master Liu Yi, and Raph came with him to Montreal. And Raphael Cruz, in his own right, was a prolific and influential circus artist with an amazing personality and an amazing charm. And in 2018, without any warning, he died. He passed away due to unexpected heart and lung failure. Pretty awful, right? Yeah. So maybe you can understand a little bit better now, not knowing Francisco really how to talk about it. And as I'm thinking about my own loss and my own grief and what we've all experienced in 2020 and 2021 with the global pandemic, not only in death, but in divorce, in breakups, in being separated from our families for long periods of time, or separated from our loved ones, or separated from our careers, our passions. There's so much loss and grief and having to deal with these really difficult emotions. And so as Francisco and I, of course, I called him back up and we did another recording, and I didn't know how I was going to use it. And the more I listen to it, the more I think I can't just chop it up and put it into the interview. It needs to sit as its own thing. And that's what this is. And I know that it's just one person's story about his brother, but I think that the themes in it and what he talks about are experiences that we're all going through right now and we can all relate to. Because, you know, when I think about circus and circus artists, I think about it being more than just the tricks, it being more than just about pushing your body or the training or the artistry. It's also about the people, the community of us, and how we help each other be strong and support each other when we're not strong. And that it's okay if you're not okay. I think that's all I want to say. Yeah, this interview, if you can even call it that, is just kind of a reflection of a life that was cut short, but is still very much present in the lives of everyone who knew Raphael Cruz. I should also mention that because this is after the fact, Francisco is on a different setup and the sound quality is a bit more distorted. It's not quite the quality that I usually like to put out on the Artist Athlete podcast. But sometimes the quality of what's being said is more important than aesthetically how it sounds, if that makes sense. So bear with me, guys, and give it a listen if you can. Here's Francisco Cruz reflecting on the life of his brother, Raphael Cruz. Since I don't know how we're going to be using this, I do want to put just a warning before it for anyone who's listening. Did it probably, but we're going to be talking about grief and death, and if this is something that's fresh for you and that's not where you want to go right now, take care of yourself and go do something really lovely. Go take a walk, because sometimes that's really hard. But yeah, I guess I wanted to talk a bit about Raph, who this episode is dedicated to, and just kind of let you share what, in your own words, how his life affected you and how his death affected you as well.
Yeah. So I mean, it's definitely one of those things where it's like, I'm very much aware of what of who he was and who he continues to be for me. It's a reality I'm still trying to grasp, because it's a reality that I sort of reject. But at the same time, I mean, I think for me, just like my brother and the tragedy of it, it's hard because I'm still so very much involved in circus. Circus for me is, has been a part of my life forever. And I think something that's really important for me, or something that I've come to realize, is that, because at one point I did consider, often with my brother, I think I considered for a bit there of leaving circus, just because it's something that, has been a part of my life. It was a part of my brother's life. And, it's just one thing I just want to say, just because, there's weird things that I always look forward to when it comes to my brother. It's things of that fantasy of in the future, of, reminiscing about the past with him, talking about our lives, when we were together, and then talking about our lives when we were apart, and just having that moment to sort of reflect on a life that we very much lived the same in a lot of ways, because my story is very much my brother's story. Even though we are different, even though we did go, our different paths, at a point, we both did circus. We both loved, we did skateboarding. We both did, I had mentioned ping pong at one point. We both did ping pong. We both did music, even though he was pretty much better at me than in everything. uh, it gave me somebody to sort of, I always aspired to be as good as him in so many different things. And having somebody like that in my life gave me everything, gave me the motivation to be better, gave me the motivation to work harder, gave me the motivation to have sort of someone to feed off of, which was everything for me. And I think it's crazy because like still, even to this day, there are days where I look at circus and I think like, because I see him in the projects I do, I see him in the people I talk to. I hear him in the process of in the creative process. I can hear his voice, I can hear his opinion, I can hear. Yeah, and there's so many times like I've asked out loud, like, "Oh, dude, like, what would you think about this? Like, would you go in this direction? Like, how would you approach this?" And so it's difficult. Like, there are definitely days where I have to stop and just reevaluate and gather myself and say, okay, I need a moment. And I think in especially being surrounded by circus and in so many projects I'm doing, especially because I'm still with the fingers, there's a lot of video editing that I do where his face is there, his movement is there, his tricks are there. So I'm lucky I have my own little office, so I can stop when I need to stop and I can breathe when I need to breathe, and just come to terms with recognizing, when I do need a break. But yeah, I think that's it. I think it's important for me just to say out loud that like I am thankful to celebrate him, and I'm really happy to see and to hear when people bring him up, and I know it's tough sometimes because people are not sure how to bring it up with me, or if I don't bring it up, they don't want to say his name. But I love having him around still, even though it's like I said, even though it's still something I struggle with of trying to accept a new reality, I guess. But still, it's weird because at the same time, talking about everything I talked about with you, going through in my head of yeah, like I trained with Lu Yi, one of the best Chinese coaches in the world, and it's like, and he was right there with me, like he was right there by my side. We bled, we sweat, we cried together, we did that, and then you flash forward and like, yeah, I picked up and I moved to Montreal. He did too. Like he was right there. He was, he was 15, tested out of school early, and he jumped on the plane with me, and we moved, to Montreal together to here. And then when I think back of ENC, it's that weird thing of like, I can always sort of in my head look over my shoulder and see him. You know what I mean? Like through everything I went through as a child, through my teens, and as an adult. It's something that I really cherish, that I can do that. Like even now when I go to shows and I'm watching a show, or I mean, not right now with the pandemic, but there's been moments where I've gone to shows and all of a sudden I can see his silhouette sitting in front of me, watching the show with me. So it's definitely an up and down, but at the same time, like I'm so thankful that he is a part of my sort of part of me. Yeah, just my journey, I guess. Like there's just a few times I sort of, I can look in the mirror and I can really say like I'm so proud of him, and that's also saying I'm proud of us. I'm proud of what we did together. I'm proud of what he became. As difficult it is, it's like the best thing I can do, or the healthiest thing I find, is really celebrating that.
That's awesome. And it's hard to speak about these things.
It is. It's tough.
It hadn't even occurred to me really, actually, though, that like you continued, and how to continue in this art form when it is so much present in such a deep relationship that you've lost. Like how much work can you do redefining it? Do you even want to? I love that you see him and he can be kind of like a guide for you.
and that's it. And then I think that you hit on it. It's like, who am I without him?
Mm.
Who am I in circus without him?
Mm.
Because for me, I very much identified circus with him. Like, he was circus for me. And so I wasn't sure, there was definitely, there still are periods where I go through where, I'm not sure what my place is in circus anymore. Am I just grasping onto sort of whispers of him? Do I continue in circus because I'm still searching for him, for us, for what we had, what we were going to do? I am happy that we accomplished so much together, and I can really say, like, those moments of like having a standing ovation with him and looking over and seeing him on stage and having that sort of unspoken language with somebody, and having, you know, toured theaters all over the world with that person, that's amazing. Like, that's a treasure, and I can be happy about that. But to continue forward, like you said, it's like I'm young enough and he was young enough that there were still a lot of things that we're sort of planning towards, and I think that's one of the hardest things for me, is just kind of coming to terms with, like, we didn't even get to fight.
Mm.
He just disappeared.
Mm.
And so it's like, it's so strange because, like, even today, there was a while where I'd still call his cell phone,
Oh yeah.
because it was still there. Like, he's so young, where it's like we had that relationship where it's like texting, talking about what TV shows we're looking at. It was very much like, hey bro, can you come pick me up at the
Hmm.
airport? Like, cool. Hey, where are you? And what was strange is, because he kind of disappeared, I was so used to him being on the road that, like, I knew that scenario of him just being on the road. So seeing him every, once a year, twice a year, three times a year, for the last years after we went our separate ways. So that was familiar to me, to sort of, he's out there. And so that's still something that creeps in, of like, yeah, he's
Wow.
out there. Like, it's normal. It's something I'd already experienced for a number of years, but he's not.
Well, thank you for sharing that. And I mean,
uh,
he is out, I mean, he's out there and he's
he's
in
out
you
there. Yeah,
and he's
of course.
everywhere. So you're kind of accurate, but I get it. It's hard.
Yeah.
And I think luckily there's no rush to come to terms with any, like, you can accept the reality that's easiest sometimes. I don't know. You know?
Yeah. Yeah. I think it's okay to, at least for me, I'm happy where I'm at a point where I understand that it's okay to be sad about it.
Mm.
Which, in the beginning, it's a lot of like, I got to be strong. I got to figure out how to deal with this. But I think now, today, like, I'm okay with not being able to deal with it sometimes, and just being given that sort of, I don't got to be strong. Like, I can be crushed. You know what I mean? And I can accept that, and I can not be strong enough, and I can really sort of look to those around me and say, like, I need help sometimes. You know what I mean? Or like I don't like this reality, like you said, and sort of saying, like, you know what, like, it's okay. I can still fantasize about that future with him, and I love it. I love looking at that. I love thinking about that. The video that just came out with my daughter is like, I love thinking, like, damn, dude, like, he would have loved it. Like, I think
Yeah.
about saying that to him, like, damn, dude, like, check out what Addie did. Like, what do you think? Like, it's so sick, no? And I still have those conversations with him. Which, like you said, I think there's something that's very personal about grief, and very intimate.
Absolutely.
And I'm still figuring that out. But at the same time, I'm also very thankful that I've sort of discovered that part of me that sort of allows myself to feel those things, to
Mm.
feel that grief, obviously, in as much as I can. But to sort of
Absolutely.
have to recognize how far I can go, and when I need help, and when I need, to lean on other people. Because I think that's important too, to recognize when it's It is too hard sometimes.
And sometimes the strongest thing you can do is just fall apart.
Exactly.
Trust yourself that you're strong enough to be
Yeah,
able to rebuild
exactly.
yourself after that.
And then at the same time, I mean, like, how cool is it that, like, I mean, that's one of the things I was really happy to sort of discuss in today is because, all over the world, like, he touched so many people, and in that sense, it's like by him touching all those people have touched me, and one thing I really, sometimes I'll do is talk to friends of his and just like, what were you guys chatting about? Like, like what were some of the things that you were discussing? I remember somebody told me, like, this is right in the beginning, and I just wanted to know, like, what they're talking about. And he was like, yeah, we were talking about the legalization of weed. And I was like, that's so random, but at the same time, I love that they were just talking, like, what does that mean for society? Like, I was like, all right, sure.
Absolutely.
Cool.
Deep convos.
I kind of love those moments of like discovering, some of the connections he made that I wasn't a part of, because we definitely, we went our own ways, which I think was like, that was a crazy moment because we had been homeschooled together our entire lives. So we were together 24/7. I mean, in a way, we really raised ourselves or each other.
Yeah.
Because
sure.
at a pretty early age, my parents allowed us to sort of go into San Francisco alone, which, that was like a train and BART.
I know. I think about that all the time, actually.
Yeah.
Ever since last week when we were interviewing, you were telling me that you guys like just like went off on your own. I was like, damn, that's a different time.
Yeah. And at one point, my parents were like, okay, like, this is how you do it. And they showed us the way and we're like, all right, cool. And then, like I said, I think I was like 13 or 14 maybe. So that means Raph was like 10 or 11. And we just like, we're homeschooled, right? And we barely did school. So we're just like, all right, sweet. It'd be like 10 a.m. And we're like, okay, we're going to go to San Francisco. It's all right. And we just like go to the bus stop, like wait for the bus and got our skateboards, go to San Francisco, just like explore the city. And we were together, like we were together so much. Like we did circus together every day, training together every day. So that's so cool that we were able to sort of have that. And we're together for so long. And then I remember when I was like 19, I was like, all right, I'm going to go to Montreal. Like, that's it. Like I'm off. And Raph dude was like confident, man. Like the dude was like so strong. He's like, I'm going too. I'm like, dude, you're 15. Like, you're not going. And he's like, I'm going to test out a high school early and I'm coming with you guys. And my parents, being like the hippies they were, they're like, all right, we support that.
That's so awesome.
So here I am. I moved to Montreal. I got my 15-year-old brother. We move in with our best friends and Raph. I mean, you can imagine a 15-year-old in Montreal with no parents, right? For him, he's like, this is like, my eyes are open. Like, this is
God.
This is amazing. I can just remember that. And just like, I think what was so cool was he really wanted to sort of venture out and figure out who he was. You know what I mean? And I think that was something that, in the beginning, of course, like as the older brother, I felt, my duty or my responsibility is to sort of keep him close. But at the same time, I realized at one point by doing that, I was pushing him further and further away. So, we did, like I said, we did ENC together, then we did Traces. And then at one point, we had to figure out for our relationship what was the healthiest thing to do. And we went our separate ways.
Yeah.
And that was one of the most difficult, strange things for both of us. I mean, we talked about it years later of like what that meant and what that felt like. And I think what was cool was like, for me, I felt like, oh shit, like if I don't have him anymore and we don't have our act together, and I don't have that person on stage with me or on tour with me or whatever, like I've just lost like my, like that's sort of in my eyes, he was like my Achilles heel, or what? Yeah, is that what it's called? It's like that weak point.
Yeah, sure.
So all of a sudden not having him, I was like, oh my God, like, can I even survive in circus without him?
Okay. Yeah. He was like protecting it.
Yeah, and I was like, I didn't realize like how strong I felt with him, and how
Mm.
confident I felt with him, and how powerful I felt with him. So like all of a sudden, when we chose to, separate, and he is actually pretty crazy because we were both supposed to go to Cirque du Soleil. We were both supposed to do Iris together,
Okay.
and so he was doing his main character. And then I was gonna go, and we had the possibility of maybe doing our act or whatever. And so I had a contract in my right there.
Mm.
I have to back up a little bit because once I had the contract, then the whole project was postponed 1 year.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
And,
Yeah. Yeah.
and so in that year, I went off, and that's when I did the independent study or at university. That's when I became a
Okay.
bartender. That's when I established a different routine in Montreal. And that's when I
Okay.
went to Rotterdam to become acrobatic director at Codart. And so during that year is when I sort of found a new me, and
Mm-hmm.
sort of, something that I'd always sort of longed for is like that routine. And so then when the project was restarting, that's when I had the conversation with Raph that like I was choosing to move to Europe to go to Code Arts, and he was going to continue on and do Iris and Cirque du Soleil. And so that was sort of the first time we didn't work together for a contract like that. And it was like one of the, I think for me, like looking back, like that was one of the most important, healthiest decisions we ever made as brothers, was to sort of, they always talk about in circus of like when you're on stage with a team or with other people, not only do you have to learn how to take the focus, but you need to learn how to give it,
Mm-hmm.
you
Yeah.
know?
Sure.
And that was one of those moments where, he went off to do this character, and he was the main character in Iris, and it was amazing. And I was so happy to like, dude, you're doing it. To have that conversation with him, be like, you're going, like, you're going to go be that main character, you're going to go in a
Yeah.
Cirque du Soleil production. Like, that's insane.
It's big.
And then he's telling me like, oh my God, like you're moving to Rotterdam with your future wife, and you're going to go be an acrobatic director. Like I'm so happy for you. That's so sick. And then to like rejoin, a year later, and there we were, me and my wife, like we drove down to LA, and I watched Iris, and I watched him open the show, of this huge, like I said, huge Cirque du Soleil production. He's, alone on this massive stage. And I started crying. I was like, that's my brother. Like he did, like
Ah.
he went, you know what I mean? And it was just such a magical moment, I think, um, that I look back on, that was like, sort of a moment where we sort of understood that to separate made us stronger together.
Yeah.
And then it continued from there. Like in the last years before he passed, we found a new relationship that obviously when you're together 24/7 growing up, it's difficult to find yourself. But then separating and finding ourselves, the last few years, it was like, and that's kind of what I hang on to today, is that it's not that I wanted anything different. I just wanted more of the same.
Yeah.
And that's
Totally.
something that's pretty fucking like awesome, I think, and amazing.
It's really
Just more of the
beautiful.
same shit. Just more of it.
More
Just
joke holes.
Just more joke holes. That's it. I mean, the dude can make me laugh still to this day. He could make me laugh more than anybody I've ever met. And
It's incredible.
Within minutes, but
Incredible.
yeah. So, anyways,
Well, thank you so much for sharing wherever he is with us right now in this interview. Yeah.
Thank you. No, thank you for letting me share. I really appreciate it.
It's my pleasure. For sure. Cool. Yeah, we got it. And that was it. Initially, I thought that I was just going to take a soundbite out of that and put it somewhere in the original interviews, but listening to the playback, I just wanted to put it out for all of you all, my dearest friends, fans, and enemies, so that you could listen to it in its entirety. I don't think it belongs or should be anything else than exactly what it is. As I mentioned, I will be taking a bit longer of a break than maybe even I'm comfortable with from producing this podcast. But I think I need it in the spirit of listening to Francisco and his experience, to listen to my own not okayness and be okay with it. I would be a hypocrite if I was not practicing what I am currently preaching. So I promise I will be back. If you want updates, if you want to support me in my hiatus, if you want little things that I will be reflecting on and creating, patreon.com/theartistathlete is the place for all of that. And otherwise, I will talk at you next time, friends, fans, and foes. Have a great summer. The Artist Athlete podcast is supported solely by donations from people like you. Here's what some of those people have to say.
Hi, my name is Noah and I do hand balancing. Hi, my name is Woody and I do Leo work. Thank you for listening to the Artist Athlete podcast.
Hi, I'm Freya. You can hear my whole story in episode 50 of the Artist Athlete podcast, but I'm here to tell you about something else that I do. I'm a qualified health and nutrition coach. I help people with sleep and body confidence, among other things. You can see everything I have to offer at wildguidance.com or follow me on Instagram at wildguidance.
Hi everyone, I'm Dominique, a ground acrobat, trapeze artist, and coach, currently bringing circus to the extremely cold but very beautiful Northern Ontario, Canada. Circus has changed my life and I'm so grateful to everyone in this community. Find me on Instagram at domupsidedown or my website domupsidedown.com.
Aloha! My name is Beth Russell, and I live on the beautiful island of Maui, Hawaii. I am an aerial artist and movement instructor specializing in chakra yoga to keep me balanced and grounded. I play with silks, trapeze, lyra, rope, acro, aerial yoga and dance, slacklining, pole, bungee, and climbing. Really anything that goes up and allows me to explore 3D space. You can find my dedicated aerial page on Instagram at Maui Aerialist. If you find yourself coming to Maui, let's play.
Hey there, friends, fans, and enemies. This is Chris Alston, Patreon of the Artist Athlete podcast, straps artist and lyra performer and acrobat out of Greenville, South Carolina. So if you're ever passing through, make sure to stop in and see me and my friends. We have a wonderful space and we'd love to see you.
Hi, my name is Erica Lee. I'm from St. Louis, Missouri, and I'm an aerialist. I teach performing arts to elementary school during the day and do pole and swing and rope by night. I really, really like the Artist Athlete podcast because it gives me a lot of circus goals to look forward to. It gives me a lot of insight on what's going on around the world in circus, and that's why I'm Patreon.
Hello all. Thank you for tuning in to the Artist Athlete podcast. I am Opal Schwartz from Minneapolis, Minnesota. If you're ever in the city, feel free to stop by the Aviary Minneapolis. It's a great time. With that, I hope you all have a wonderful rest of your week, and goodbye.
Hey there, artists and athletes. This is Andy Smith, owner and artistic director at Saltaire Circus School in Jacksonville Beach, Florida. And I want to thank you for contributing to the Artist Athlete podcast. If you ever find yourself down in Florida, come check us out. Whether you're an artist, athlete, or someone ordinary just looking to be extraordinary, we got a place for you.